We are at the bottom of page 3, still in section 1.4, some of the basic rules of algebra. And we're to the distributive property. And there's something really fun about the distributive property, although it is, it's a little, it can be one of those that people try to use it all the time. As soon as they see a number in front of parentheses, then they just take that and multiply it by everything. But one thing you want to get straight and get in your head is that multiplication distributes over addition, okay? Now, why is that? It's not because some committee voted and decided. It's because what works with algebra does so because it works with all numbers. My pen looks like it's running out. Oh, there it goes. Maybe I was just holding it. Okay, so that's where they come up with these. So that means that if you try to multiply over anything else, you know, like try to multiply over multiplication, then you're going to run into trouble because that's not what happens with numbers. Let me give you an example of that. So let's say you have, with numbers, 5 times the quantity 3 plus 1. Okay? Now, before we learn the concept of distribution, we would use order of operations, and I'm just going to abbreviate here, the O of ops here. Using order of operations, we would do what was inside the parentheses first, the 3 plus 1, which would leave us with 5 times 4. Then we'd multiply and we'd get 20. Okay? So if I write the same thing, 5 times 3 plus 1, but now I use distribution, I can't just make up something that's then going to change what the value is. This value is still 20. That's not going to change. So distribution has to match that. So distribution says that the 5 times 3 plus the 5 times 1 is what will give us that 20, because 15 plus 5 equals 20. Okay? Now if this had been 3 times 1 on the inside, 3 times 1 is 3, 5 times 3 is 15. And you try to distribute that 5 across 3 times 1 and try to make it 5 times 3 times 5 times 1, you'd have 15 times 5 is 75. All of a sudden you jump from something that equals 15 to something that equals 75. Okay, so you have to be really, really careful. It's only over addition. And again, that's something I'd love to explain more to you during class or during a club time or office hour if you want to see more of why that is. Okay, but it's only over addition. And again, I mentioned this. The distributive property, the purpose is to be able to remove parentheses. And so when you start seeing simplify in the directions, what they're saying is to look for any place where you can distribute across multiplication across addition to be able to remove the parentheses. And then the second part of simplifying is combining any like terms that result over there in the first place. Now let's start off at number 38. I just spent several minutes of your life and mine hammering home the idea that multiplication only distributes over addition. And here the very first example has subtraction. So the question is, will it still work? Well, let's talk about what I've been mentioning through this section, that subtraction is really adding the negatives. Okay, 3x minus 2 is the same as, it's an equivalent expression to 3x plus negative 2. So we really are adding. Subtraction is really just adding the negatives. Division is really just multiplying by the inverses. Okay, so let's rewrite this here so we can be sure that we're distributing over the addition. This will help with, if you're the kind of person that tends to drop negatives or be really unsure what to do with negatives, or is it a minus, is it a negative? Am I subtracting, am I adding? Where does the negative go? This will solve a lot of this. For most people, this is what takes care of it, is getting this idea across that subtraction is really adding the negative. Okay. So now when you distribute, it's going to be 6 times 3x plus your 6 times negative 2. So it's 6 times 3x plus the 6 times negative 2. Notice what happened here. The 6 got multiplied across both pieces, so there's the 2 multiplications that you ended up. Your plus sign came straight down in between the 2 multiplications, and your 2 original terms inside the parentheses are still the exact same thing that we started with, the 3x and minus 2. So there's no question what happens with the negatives here. So it's 6 times 3x, 6 times, oh, we get a chance to regroup. Instead of multiplying the 3x first, because we can't go anywhere with that, we regroup and multiply the 6 times 3 first, and that becomes 18x. And then 6 times negative 2 is going to be a negative 12. Now, if you wrote it as 18x minus 12, that's the same. These are equivalent expressions, okay? All right, let's look at number 32. What's different about this one? We notice that's a strong question to ask every time. It will help you convince yourself, I'm doing the same type of problem. I'm going to use the same steps I did before. It's just starting out looking a little different. In this case, 2 things are different that stand out to me. First of all, there's a fraction out front, and we are just going to get over our fears of fractions and decimals. We're going to say, bring it on. We are ready. We're going to know how to do this. Second thing I notice is that on the inside of the parentheses, constant term is coming ahead of the term with the variable. Again, a little different, but it's not going to change how we do it. Okay, so we've got 1/4 outside the parentheses. We're using the distributive property to remove those parentheses, which means that we're going to go ahead and apply the multiplication to both pieces. And I've got an addition here, so I know that I'm allowed to do that. And it looks like 1/4 times 12 plus 1/4 times 8r. So again, matching what we did before, the 1/4 is multiplied twice. You see it gets distributed over 2 terms. That means there's going to be 2 multiplications. The plus sign still hangs out right in the middle of those 2 multiplications. And then our original 2 terms, the 12 and the 8r, show up inside that distribution, 12 and 8r. So then we get to multiply, and 1/4 of 12, and we did multiplying fractions in section 2. So again, if you still need help with fractions, get it right away, because the fractions aren't going to go anywhere. If anything, they're going to become more and more prevalent and frequent and more challenging. So make sure you get the help you need. 1/4 of 12 is 3, plus 1/4 of 8r. We get to use the associative property and regroup and multiply the 1/4 times 8 first, which leaves us with 2 times r, or just 2r. Okay. So copy what you've seen, maybe talk it through with somebody. That's the best way to start solidifying the information for long-term memory. When you take an exam, you will rely on what's in that that's what will come out, is the long-term memory. If you haven't taken the time to really rehearse something, you're just going to be kind of taking stabs in the dark, and some of it will come out okay, some of it will come jumbled, and some of it will come out wrong. So that's not a risk I think you want to take when it comes to an exam. You want to do your absolute best that you can and show what you really know. So talking it through with somebody will be the rehearsals that will help get it to the long-term memory. All right, you try number 30 and press the pause button until you're ready to see the answer. And here it is. When you distribute that 9, you end up with 18x plus 45. It takes care of page 3 for us.